And this goes to show you that people don't need to know your name for you to be remembered. For those of you who have heard people say that Jesus never said, I am the Messiah, I am the Christ, here it is. Plain and simple, I am He. Did you write his word up on your heart? Are you actually in conversation with God? Do you actually know him? Or have you just heard about him? Because that's the difference between the woman at the well and the people that she ran to. She didn't just hear about him, she was experiencing Jesus. So, welcome to Women of Valor, week 21. Tonight we are studying the woman at the well. And this story has been told in every church and in probably every women's ministry out there. There are whole books written about the analysis of this one chapter. And this goes to show you that people don't need to know your name for you to be remembered. You don't need some great heroic story to be enough for God to see you as valuable or to redeem you. So today we are going to dive into the well. And there's so much to unpack, and we're going to get through as much as the Holy Spirit will allow in the time that we have. And we're going to begin by reading John chapter 4, almost the entire chapter. We'll stop at verse 42. There is purpose for going that far down. I'll give you a moment to get there. I'm reading out of the New King James Version, beginning at verse 1. It says, therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go through Samaria, though Jesus himself did not baptize, but his disciples. So he came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink, for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. The woman said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock? And Jesus answered and said to her, whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water, springing up into everlasting life. The woman said to him, sir, give me this water that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw. Jesus said to her, go call your husband and come here. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. And Jesus said to her, you have said well, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one who you now have is not your husband. In that you spoke truly. The woman said to him, sir, I perceive you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountains, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship. And Jesus said to her, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. And at this point, his disciples came and they marveled that he talked with the woman. Yet no one said, what do you seek? Or why are you talking with her? The woman then left her water pot, went her way into the city, and said to the men, come, see a man who told me all the things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ? Then they went out of the city and came to him. In the meantime, his disciples urged him, saying, Rabbi, eat. But he said to them, I have food to eat, which you do not know. Therefore, the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him anything to eat? Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Do you not say there are still 4 months and then comes the harvest? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look out at the fields, for they are already white for harvest. And he who reaps receives wages and gathers fruit for eternal life, that both he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together. For in this the saying is true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you have not labored. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labors. And many of the Samaritans of that city believed in him because of the word of the woman who testified. He told me all that I ever did. So when the Samaritans had come to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. And many more believed because of his own word. Then they said to the woman, now we believe, not because of what you said, for we ourselves have heard him, and we know that this is indeed the Christ, the Savior of the world. Amen. For those of you who have heard people say that Jesus never said, I am the Messiah, I am the Christ, here it is. Plain and simple, I am he. This story is extremely powerful. What do you get right off the bat? Anyone want to share? What are your initial thoughts on going through this whole story?
I don't know. I'm still stuck on their conversation because, you know, I stay in the Message Bible streets also. And the entire conversation, they gave tone and everything to like the conversations. Like when God is telling, Jesus is telling her that, you know, if you knew the generosity of God and you knew who I was, you'd be asking me for a drink. And the fact that the next verse, they have the woman saying, sir, you don't even have a bucket to draw with.
Yes.
like, what you mean? I'm gonna be asking you for what water? Where you gonna get it from?
Exactly.
Make it make sense. I'm like,
exactly. Because that's what we all think, right? You just asked me for water, and you're telling me you got water to give me.
Right. Okay. And then when he's like, go call your husband, and he's like, I have no husband. And then they have Jesus saying, oh, you put that nicely. I have no husband. You had 5 of them. And the man that you live with, not even your husband. So I guess you spoke truth right there. Sure enough, you don't have a husband. Like, it's like this conversation.
Yes. There's
so you a prophet. Okay. So well, tell me this then. That like the whole conversation, I'm just like, I can picture it because of the tone that they put with the Message Bible. And it because she once he said that, you know, this is that you won't get thirsty again. She's like, oh, you know, give me this water. And then once he starts asking questions again, she goes back to kind of being defensive and back on it. Well, first of all, again, you're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan. What's the angle here? What are you trying to do?
Right. Right. Like nobody wants to be out in the middle of the day drawing water. So if you've got this water,
that's very important to pick up, because if you know, when people send texts to each other, that texts can get you in trouble.
Yep.
Because people, that's not what I meant. You took that. So when she said, you're I'm a Samaritan and you asking me, so is the question like she's questioning, or is she giving an attitude? You know, there's one that you have to. And what saying that I have 5 husbands? Well, remember, women could not divorce. It was the men only that could divorce. So she was divorced 4 times and probably living with this person, you know, and not married. And she was probably feeling so rejected, like low, because the man was the one that said, I didn't want you.
Hmm. Well, we don't know if she was indeed married or if she had 5 partners. Like,
Well, he said that you had 5.
Yeah, husbands, and
Husband.
the
He did
one you're
say-
with now
Correct.
is not your
Is not,
husband.
yeah,
Is not your
you're
husband,
just
right.
living with him.
So
Exactly.
she had 5 orders, like, get away. I don't, you know.
Mm-hmm. So you're right. Like, you picked up, both of you, all of you have picked up on the very obvious attitude in this difficult conversation here. and you're exactly
Yeah.
right. A text can be misconstrued, but when you and you're careful with reading between the lines, but it's obvious with the words that she says. What were you getting ready to say, Melva?
You know how sometimes people say, well, yeah, I know that person, and you know, this person is this, that, or the other, like they really know him, but they really don't know him. You know, and where she says, the woman said to him, you know, I know the Messiah is coming, who is called the Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. He's already telling her all things concerning herself, but she really doesn't see it. And then when Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. So it's like, yeah, the Messiah is coming. He's going to tell me everything. You know, I really don't need to hear from you, because the Messiah, I know the Messiah, and the Messiah is coming. He's going to tell us everything we need to know.
Exactly. That's exactly
Yeah,
it.
and that's the other thing that I noticed too, because you know, in the Message Bible, it has her, like, after he says that, her response is, well, you know, I don't know about all that you said. I know that that there is a Messiah, and when he get here, I'm gonna hear it from him. That's pretty much like, you know, maybe what you said got married, but you know, I'm gonna hear it from the one when he get here.
We'll wait. We'll
Right.
see.
Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah.
then even funnier to me is that when they had the disciples show, because you're saying like the disciples all had question, like, why is he talking to this woman, but like didn't say anything. And it says like they all had the question, and even though they didn't verbalize it, you could see it on their faces.
I'm sure.
They all looking like, what?
They probably pointing to each other like, what is happening over here?
And also, after she spoke to him, she went and told people, and a woman's word was no value. So what made it come? They came to see Jesus, you know. So something happened. The work, something happened in that they believe, you know, they wanted to see what was going on, because a woman had no value. Her word was had no value.
Well, he changed that, didn't he?
Yeah.
And it's probably well, let me back up. I think what I find reading the Bible as a youth, teenager, and as an adult, it's just mind-blowing to me, because like you said, you hear these things all the time, and it's like, how did I miss this? Why did I not think of it this way? But comparing the New Testament and how God would ask questions, and me and my daughter always say, God is something else. He knows the answer, and yet he's asking him, where's your brother? And it's like, I already know you didn't kill your brother, but I'm gonna just ask you anyway. And it's like, you know, and then it's like Jesus is asking her, go get your husband. And it's like, but he knows already. And it's just like little things like that. And it's like, are you gonna tell the truth? He's giving you a chance, you know. And it's like, just like in life, there's different little obstacles and tests that he already knows, but he gives us these little tests and opportunities to come forth and tell the truth. And the fact that the time of day that she was at the well, at the most hottest time of the day, when I read that the women tend to go in the morning or night, because she did not want to be around the other women, because they did not want to be around her. They probably didn't want to be associated with her. And so I thought, wow, how sad, because we do that. We do that. I mean, everyone's guilty. We have done that. We have ostracized people. And I kind of looked at it different. I know they said she had 5 husbands, but did some of them die and she was given to someone else? Who knows? I don't know. That's, you know, the thing is that he told her. And I think looking at it, like for me, um, growing up and seeing prophets in church that say things, it's not something you don't know. A prophet is not going to prophesy and tell you something that you don't know or that you have not been toiling with. It's for confirmation, and a lot of, it's confirmation. So he was confirming, and so to me, that's why they listened to her. That urgency that she ran with.
Mhm. So a
To
prophet does
say,
both. A prophet does both. A
Yeah.
prophet will tell you because that's something that he says in Isaiah, like, my prophets will tell you the beginning of time. Your prophets weren't there and have no idea. He says, but they'll also prophesy towards the future things to come.
yes,
So a prophet does do both, but you're right. Like, there's a confirmation word that comes with that, so that this is the Lord that is providing me a message. Yep.
and I did have one question. I always wondered when they say, we know God is a spirit and worship him in spirit and in truth. What does that really mean? That little passage, worship him in spirit and in truth.
Great question. So when you look at other religions, how do they physically worship God? And for the sake of time, some people have marked their bodies, scourging and whatnot, and or sacrificing other humans, right? Other animals, and that's the thing. Like, we worship in spirit. We worship by singing, by edifying, by lifting up with our heart's cry. And when we worship him with our spiritual being, it's more than just our physical body. Like, even when we're fasting, we are letting go of our physical body to worship closer in spirit. Does that make sense?
It does. It
And
does.
so when it talks about in spirit and in truth, start combing through your life and figuring out what is not truthful. What do I have blinders on in my life? And what am I coming to God with that I know needs to be handled, but I'm too scared to, like, pluck that out? And I'll use this as an example. I'll use this woman right here. She's living with a man who's not her husband, but she's doing husband and wife things with this man, right? So if she were to come to Jesus, she did, and still have this blinder that this situation that she's living in is okay. That's not living in the truth. That is living against God's will, God's law, what he says for our life. So when we look at the commandments that he gives us, those commandments, God is the truth. His word is the truth. And so when we start putting the word into action into our lives, we start to divide what reflects God and what is the truth versus what is not a reflection of God, and the lies that we tell ourselves about the situations that we're in. So be honest when you come to God. There's a lot of people that say, well, I'm and I'll use some things that I've seen in my history, in my past, from other people. I'm a Christian. I do this all the time. I go to church, every Sunday. But do you know the Lord? You telling me because you sat at a location for 2 hours every week that gave you a relationship with God? Did you write his word up on your heart? Are you actually in conversation with God? Do you actually know him, or have you just heard about him? Because that's the difference between the woman at the well and the people that she ran to. She didn't just hear about him, she was experiencing Jesus. And then for a time, they only heard about him until they came to see about him themselves. Right? So.
And they weren't going to take her word for it. They wanted to hear him.
They did both. They took her word for it because they came.
Yeah, but you know what? It was out of curiosity. Let's see what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
But he says, not because you said, but because we heard him.
He said, not just because you've heard, we believe, right? But here's the thing. With her history, as we've gone through this whole chapter, they could have dismissed her.
Yeah,
and they didn't. They said, okay, this woman probably don't talk to us anymore. She knows that we shun her, and here she is, all lively, exclaiming these things, running into town, shouting these things about the Messiah. And the Messiah is something that we've been waiting for. Pique their interest at the very least. And if she was living in shame and was shouting about this shame that she was living in, looking free from it, maybe there's something to what she's saying. So good points, very good points. So this story, when you go through this entire story, the first thing that you notice is that it says Jesus needed to go through Samaria. And Samaria was a place that most Jews would avoid. And does anyone know why? So there was another route often taken by Jews traveling from Judea to Galilee, and it was a longer route, and it was through the Jordan River. Who wants to go cross the river just for a longer route to avoid some people? But they would rather cross the river than engage in an ongoing civil feud between the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom, because the 12 tribes divided, 10 up north and 2 in the bottom, 2 in the south. And there was name calling. The southern kingdom called the northern kingdom, where the Samaritans were, half breeds, I think they called them. That was part of
Yeah, because they were half Jewish and half whatever.
a Gentile. And not only that, but prior to the exile, they were creating their own idols. They were worshiping false gods. They were sacrificing to these false gods, even sacrificing children. And so they separated. And those that followed Eli into Shiloh went to the southern kingdom, and that was Jerusalem and Judea. And the other tribes stayed in the northern kingdom, which was the 10 tribes. So that exile and them returning back has to do with the repopulation and where they are now. So I give you this little bit of history because it's good to understand a bit of the attitude. And I'm going to call her Sammy, right? the woman, the Samaritan woman. We're going to call her Sammy. A bit of the attitude that she had during her encounter at the well with Jesus. It gives you some background story to it. And Jesus is adamant about going through Samaria. And that's because there's work to be done. Our Savior didn't just come for the Jew, he came for the Gentile also. And that sets the stage for chapter 4. So Jesus stops at a piece of land that Jacob gave to Joseph, a very significant piece of land here. A place where many gathered because Jacob dug the well there, right? So Jesus stops at the well. Today it's the water cooler at work, right? Where everybody stops and gossips. And he sends his disciples off to go get food. And it tells us that Jesus was tired. In fact, it says he was weary, that it was the heat of the day. It was high noon. So as Jesus is sitting there resting, he had an appointment, right? Sammy came to draw water. And I love that Jesus cut right to the chase. He didn't dance around it. He simply said, give me a drink. Not, hi, how are you doing? It's hot, making small talk. None of that, right? Nobody wants to be bothered with that. Give me a drink. But why was this woman in such a bad mood? Yeah, it was high noon, heat of the day, but she was coming to draw water and to carry it during the hottest part of the day alone. You know, we know that Jesus reveals to us parts of her private business, and then he makes a great revelation to her, one that he doesn't make often, frequent in the word at all. And like we pointed out, usually the women came together during the cooler parts, the earlier parts of the day where it's not so hot, where you're sweating and trying to carry all of this. And we make the assumption that her love life is the cause to her being outcast from others, right? Those are the little details that we piece together. Maybe there was gossip about whose husband she might be going for next, you know? Maybe they were afraid to get too close, and we can assume all of those things. And again, I don't like to ever assume, but it's given to us. Immediately, it's revealed that she is upset, partly because of the feud between Jews and Samaritans. It's the first thing that she says to him. How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? Not only was she a woman and he was crossing the line, but she was a Samaritan. And so he was crossing multiple lines. And John, because he's John, stops and gives us side commentary. And he says, for the Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Like, how rude, right? Why was that necessary? But, you know, thank you, John. So Jesus adjusts the subject a tiny bit, right? Because she pointed out that he was a Jew. She brought up who she thought he was, and he corrected her. He said, if you knew the gift of God, that being redemption and salvation, and who it is that says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. So Jesus alludes to who he is and tells her that God's gift is available to her if only she just asks. So know who you're talking to or who you were in the room with. She assumed who he was instead of letting him tell her. She judged a book by its cover. And oh, are we so wrong when we do that?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Or to everyone here? How would you be if someone just came to you and said, give me water?
That's what I'm sitting here thinking. Like, I think she judged him just like you. I don't know you, but you also did not
Has
introduce
your mother
yourself.
taught you manners? And what?
Right. What household are you living in? Give me a drink. I don't even know you. Where your bucket? You want my bucket?
Yeah.
It's a lot of talk that you're doing for somebody that was asking me for water. I mean, that's all I'm saying.
This just came, it's like, boy, I need to submit, Lord, I need to submit.
And God forbid she was having a bad day, right? But
Right.
probably the best day of her life after that. Here's the thing. If she was, as you saw in here, quoting the history of the land that they were on, and how worship was supposed to be done on that mountain, even though they were Gentiles, right? What about Mosaic law that says to honor the widow, the fatherless, and the stranger in your land? So as this stranger in her land is asking her for water, is that not part of what she's supposed to do?
Well, Jesus wasn't supposed to talk to her, right?
Because of the feud between Samaritans and Jews.
But was it because she was a woman also?
So that's partly it, because she points that out. But as we go back into our previous Woman of Valor, that's what happened with Rebecca, right? Can you give me a drink? Yep, and I'll water your camels too. Right?
I think if it is like Miss Jeanette was saying, though, if it is like he's not necessarily supposed to be talking to her, I think it is understandable for her to hold off on what, I'm supposed to be kind to the stranger, but also the stranger is not following the proper decorum as well. So now I'm trying to figure out what's going on.
But
because I'm already here by myself.
The first thing that she points out is the fact that one's a Jew and one's a Samaritan. So that tells us where her mind was. Sometimes we talk too much, right? We let too much of what's going on in our minds out. And she did that. She said, how is it that you, a Jew, I'm sure she looked him up and down at the same time, right? If she had any Puerto Rican in her.
Said, what are you doing here? You didn't go the way that they always went through the Jordan to the other river.
If she had any Puerto Rican in her, she looked him up and down when she said that. I know that for a fact, right? How is it you, the Jew, is asking me, talking to me, right? How dare you even ask? Yep. Her response to him was sounding like it was a lot of contempt and not with the water to quench that he asked for. But yet he offered her a drink from living water before she could even ask. She still didn't know what he was talking about. She was lost half this conversation, most of this conversation. It sounded confusing to her because, like we said, if it was us, we would have thought to ourselves or out loud, if you got water, why are you asking me for mine? It's like seeing somebody with $100 in their pocket asking us for a quarter. Okay.
If I didn't already think it was a setup, after you said that, I'd have been like, okay, now I got to go home. Something's wrong. You asking me for water, but you got water everlasting?
It's too hot for this. It's too hot for this, right?
It's too hot. It's too hot. It's been humid. I can't. Not today.
Right. But what did he do with that conversation, with his response? When he said to her, I got this water everlasting. If you knew who it was, then I would have given it to you. He checked her heart. And her heart was bitter. Yeah. When was the last time someone was kind to her? Or someone offered her something? And he offers her this water And what does she do next? She comments on what she sees with her limited vision. You got nothing to draw with. Would you say, Aaliyah, the Message Bible says, where's your bucket? Like, you,
Sir, you don't even have a bucket.
exactly.
That's like literally what it say.
Exactly. She came to this well with full attitude about who she initially perceived Jesus to be, just walking up and looking at him. A random person from Judea. And she says to him, do you think that you're better than Jacob? Better than our fathers who put this well here? Better than Joseph? She starts pulling out lineage and ancestry. You think you're better than them? That's her response. Instead of initially answering her question, or rather her statement, because that wasn't a question, he tells her the difference between the water in the well and the living water in front of her. Ladies, do you know the difference between vanilla extract and imitation vanilla?
It doesn't have liquor.
Anyone
I'm
else?
actually rum. Is it that? That's how you.
I think it
No
is.
Is one
vanilla
actually?
bean? No
I'm about
vanilla
to say,
bean?
yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Isn't one it actually extracted from the bean, and the other one is just the imitation of the flavor?
So pure vanilla extract, mom has seen me do this. It's really just two, like from when I made a little jar this big, it's like 2 vanilla beans and rum. And basically when you cook, the alcohol evaporates. But after soaking the beans in there for at least a month, it extracts the flavor, right? Well, imitation vanilla actually has something in it that's a byproduct of wood chips and
my
petroleum.
goodness.
Petroleum, crude oil. And the difference between real and imitation is that imitation has the possibility of damaging you in the long run. Even if it serves its immediate purpose of quenching your thirst or providing you some flavor right now. So how often do we try to substitute what God is offering us with something that will only leave us dry in due time?
It's cheap, but it costs us a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Cheap, but it costs us a lot.
No more imitation for me.
And then you can make it with vodka.
You could, but again, all that evaporates out, and what's left is just the vanilla.
Mm.
So what
But
is
it takes like 6 months. It takes
month.
about 6.
A month?
I've been looking like 1,200 videos.
I made it.
I know. And that's the shortcut way.
Mhm.
That is the shortcut way. Everyone that I was using was like a 6 month, and I was like, 6 months.
That's still better than imitation, I'll tell you that.
Yes.
So
Man.
what's the next thing that Jesus says to her? As Leah pointed out, give me this water that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw. There's still attitude in her response. Like, do you think that I'm coming here in the middle of noon with these buckets on my shoulders because for my health? Like, I don't want to come here. If you have this water that's going to prevent me from coming here, one, why are you here? Right? Why are you asking me for water? And just go ahead and give it to me then. In other words, when somebody says,
Give me the water with your non-existent bucket. Go on, do it. I want to see you.
that's somebody saying, I got a unicorn. Really show me. Show
Right.
me. It's her disbelief. So this back and forth between her and him is one of the longest recorded conversations that Jesus has with somebody. In the previous chapter, he's talking with Nicodemus, and it is a pretty lengthy conversation, but this conversation, he's pretty much doing a verbal dance with her. And the outcome is amazing. And so when he sits there and he says, almost like driving, and he'll go call your husband and tell him to come here. This is the point where I imagine her getting upset because she calls him a prophet, right? And really, I feel like that was said in mockery, like, you must have heard that I have a history.
Right.
Right. First you got water everlasting, now you a prophet. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No, now you're putting me down.
Right.
Right.
This is why you didn't get none of my water in the
You'll
first place.
never
I knew
get
it was
water
gonna see
now.
some
Forget it.
foolishness. Right. I knew it was some foolishness when you just no introduction, no nothing. And you was a okay. I see
Right.
what it is now.
I just see her getting more and more upset. Like, I guess you're a prophet then. You know the obvious, what everybody knows, like, yes, I've had a number of husbands, right? And that's when she starts going in to him about this lineage. And when he tells her, listen, there's coming a time where it won't be in this mountain in the northern kingdom, or in that mountain in the southern kingdom, or anywhere else. This is where we will be worshiping within ourselves. He's given her keys. And he's not just giving it to her, he's giving it to us. Because anything that is written in this word, like, that conversation could have just been for them if it was only for her to receive. But when it's written down for us to read 2,000 years later, we're still receiving from what he intentionally wanted us to glean from this. That everlasting water, that living word, because he is the living word. When he says, when she goes back and says, I know that the Messiah is coming. And when he comes, he'll tell us all things. That was, like you said, Aaliyah, with an attitude like, you know what? You don't have to talk to me anymore. The actual prophet, the actual Messiah, he's coming, and he'll sort this out, whether it's your mountain or mine, whether it's my water or yours, whether it's Samaritans or Jews. Here's the obvious thing. They're all Israelites. They're all Israelites. They're all descendants of Jacob. They're all, like, if that's Jacob's well, they're all descendants of Jacob. It's a civil feud. And too often we get caught in family bickering that divide us from a kingdom that is waiting for us, from a blessing that is waiting for us. Because we don't know how to share, we don't know how to act, who knows? They didn't want to share water, or she didn't want to share water at this point, but they didn't know how to act before when they were creating false idols and making sacrifices. There's family feuds in almost every family. And what Jesus was trying to do in this point was to bring unity back. He could have gone around Samaria, but he didn't. And that's what he talks about, the fields being ripe for the harvest. Like, I've got certain things growing right now. For instance, I got the strawberries growing outside, and they bud a white flower before the white flower falls off and produces a strawberry. So when he says, don't you see the fields white for the harvest? The flowers have budded, and in due time, you'll be reaping everything from it. That's what he says to his disciples. But when we go back to his conversation with the Samaritan woman, and she points out all of this will be settled by the Messiah, that says something about what she knew. Because again, the two kingdoms were separated because of their false idol worship. And so here she is, still bringing the word, still listening to the word of God. The Messiah is coming. It shows us what she believed in that moment. She still didn't know who she was talking to, but she believed in a Messiah. And when he took that moment to reveal to her and said, I who speak to you am he, she realized she was talking to the Messiah. What did she do? She ran, mouth open, bucket dropped, because it says she left her bucket behind. She ran off. She didn't run off in fear. What would you do? We have a whole song that says, I could only imagine. What would you do? How would you react if the person in front of you just told you that they were the Messiah that you were waiting for?
Read the news.
I want to say that I would spread the news, but I mean, also when you asked us how we was gonna react if that dead woman just sat up and what we would do. Why you laughing? I'm being honest. I was like, I'm out of there. That's a zombie. I don't care what nobody say. I'm watching from afar. So I could already see myself looking at this person and being like, okay, the homeless have made their way here. All right, got it. Like somebody with mental illness is talking to me. No, I'm serious. Like somebody with mental illness is talking to me right now because this is who he believes that he is. Well, you know what? It was nice to meet you. And I wish you well on the rest of your journeys. Because, you know, I'm not well versed in it. You know, I have my Bible, I read it. I haven't finished the story, but I know it's some things that you're gonna go through. So wish you well.
But you're right. Like if we were to have a quiz in front of us saying, what do you think she'll say next based off of her previous responses? Will it be, you are the Messiah? Will it be, sir, go away from me? Will it be, yeah, I'm gonna go get my husband, but it's not for this water? Like, you know, what do you think her response would be based on her previous responses to him? We're shocked that the scales fell from her eyes and she no longer was mocking him, but she believed. What changed?
I believe
Her
he
heart.
revealed himself to her in more ways than, like those two guys that were walking on the road and they were walking with Jesus and didn't know that he was walking with them. And he's been talking to them all this time. And they were really interested in what he was saying, but they still didn't know that it was him until a little while later. It's like he revealed himself. So I was thinking, did he do something that just opened it up?
I think, from my speculation, whatever happened there, because he did reveal to her, you know, the knowing about her husbands, but that wasn't the catalyst. That's not what changed her mind.
I know.
So
because that could have been that could have been talk out there.
Right. But when he said, I am he, there was no talk back. There was no hesitation. There was no mockery.
I am
he.
I think
Did the disciples pull up right after that?
Right during that time, right before then. Right before then, like as they were going through that last.
I can imagine him saying, "It is I," and then the disciples come up over the hill, and she like, "Whoa, what? This who I've been like, just you can't see my face right now. I'm bonnet strapped, so I don't have my video on. But like, I could see her looking around, like, "Ain't no way, ain't no way." And then you know how people, when you realize, like, especially if you're sitting there, like. You've seen like the little like snippets or clips that people do like when they're talking horrible about their boss or something and they've never met the boss and then it's the boss right there. So they have that moment of like, oh crap, but then also they start reflecting on everything that they said.
Yep. She recognized her whole attitude in that moment.
Yeah, because Jesus looks at the heart. And the whole time she was talking to him, he was examining her heart. And she was trying to be deceptive. Even when she said, I have no husband, he was like, yeah, you have 5. Okay, and the one you with now is not. All right. And so with that, it's like, okay, now he's reading me. Okay, I'm gonna keep on talking to him and see what he says now, but he must be some kind of prophet or something. Or whatever. But at the same time, Jesus is still looking at her. And when she tells him, about the Messiah, he knows that she believes, even though she has not seen him. She doesn't know what he looks like, but she believes.
Yeah. And that's the thing.
She doesn't know what he looks like.
Well, that's the thing that makes.
But she believes.
Well, she's standing right in front of him now. So she definitely sees what he looks like. And
yeah, but she's never seen him before.
Nope. But in last week's Women of Valor, when we were studying the woman with the issue of blood, she had only heard about what Jesus did. And through
Right.
hearing, she came seeking from him for him. But that's the difference between last week's Woman of Valor and this week's Woman of Valor. And the reason, the thing that makes tonight's Woman of Valor one of the top focus is that Jesus went looking for her. He came to heal her. He came to change her story and to impact the lives of those who would receive him in a place where Jews and Gentiles did not get along. And he told her about her past and her present. And when she said to him with the attitude, I'm sure when the Messiah comes, he'll sort it out. He'll tell us what's what. In that moment, she still didn't know who Jesus was, but he revealed to her, I am he. And what did she do with this revelation? She believed flat out. And that's what we're called to do. Believe that Jesus is the Messiah, that he has come to redeem us. She didn't keep that good news to herself. She didn't even stay to revel in his presence. She wasn't even standing there in awe. Like I said, we talk about that song, I could only imagine what I sing, what I cry, what I dance. She ran. But she didn't run because she was afraid. She did what we are all supposed to do. She went and got more people so that they could believe too. She went from sinner to evangelist in one conversation.
He said he went to her, and just the verse comes to me. He leaves the 99 to go for that lost one. He's always coming for us. We are the one that depart from the Father. The Father doesn't depart from us. But just like in the beginning, he's there, he's waiting for us, but we don't want to meet him because of our sin.
Yeah. I may have stood there. I may have cried. I may have asked him 5 more questions. I may have got him that drink of water that he asked for.
Right.
But she did the best thing ever. She ran and got more people. And a woman that was rejected and outcast and shunned and alone, embarrassed and shamed, became a spokesperson for the Messiah.
That's like when you first get born again, when you first have that relationship, you want to share it with the world. You're on fire.
You're on fire.
And it doesn't matter anything that you've done in the past. That's all in the past. You've got new insight now. Forget about that because you're not looking back.
Yeah. So this story is beautiful because I'm sure I can do the math and figure out how much time he would have saved by going straight through Samaria, right, to get to Galilee, or how much time he would have actually saved by taking the long route because he stood there 2 days. So it wasn't about the distance. It wasn't about the time. It
was about the time. It was about an appointed time.
It wasn't about the length of time that he was.
I know what you're saying, but I'm saying
Yes.
it's about an appointed time, the time he had appointed with her.
And not just her, with the whole village, with the whole city. Jesus came into a place
So
that
he would go a long route.
where people avoid, where people would have ran around instead. How much more does he do that for us? Where he comes and
He
seeks
used
us
her
out.
to show his love.
Mm-hmm. He seeks us out.
He used her to show his love.
Go ahead, Melva.
He used her to show his love to those who are outcast, those who are downtrodden. The Messiah, comes to her, a person who everybody, shuns. But he came to her and she went back to deliver the message to the people. that he was there to bring them back to meet Jesus.
Can we go a little deeper here for a second?
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that he said to her was, "Give me a drink." And when she said, for failure of better words, no, right, with the constant responses and attitude, he could have walked away. He could have let her be. How many times did he go back and forth with her until he set her free? And sometimes there's something that we're trying to let go of. There's a sin or a habit that we're trying to break. And maybe we had a long stint where we were good. I'll use eating cookies as an example, right? So maybe you're trying to pay attention to your diet, and everybody's bringing in all these sweets and whatnot, and you're like, no, I'm good, I'm fine. And all of a sudden you eat this cookie and you start feeling bad because you're like, man, this cookie wasn't even worth it. It didn't even taste the way I thought it would. I went and left my good healthy diet for this.
Just tastes like shame.
It tastes like shame. I feel ashamed, right? All of that. Shame has a taste. So, but here's the thing, like at that point, some of us will choose to just say, forget it. Why am I even bothering? Why do I try? I might as well just eat all the cookies that I want because this is who I am. And no matter how long I try to not eat cookies, I'm just going to eat the cookie, right? That's me putting it in a clean way. But sometimes there are habits that the devil will try to hold us down with and remind us, hey, you did that. This is your personal sin. This is your own perfume. This is what I know you like. Go ahead and enjoy it. And you may reason for a while and stay away from it for a moment, and then somehow end up right back in it and want to be left alone crying in your mess. Jesus didn't leave her alone after her first response and attitude towards him. Thank God he does not leave us alone when we give him an attitude about where we are and how we got there and the difference between me and you and him. Thank God he does not leave us alone in our mess. He kept going back and forth with her until she got it. And I am grateful that he keeps going back and forth with us until we get it. That is why she is a woman of valor. It's not because of the argument that she has with Jesus over water. It's because not only did Jesus go looking for her, but the moment she got it, the moment she understood who it was that was there, she ran and got more. That's what we're supposed to do. We're called to make more disciples.
And so if you think about it, when something good happens to you, you want to call the closest person to you. You want to call, it's like, this will happen to me, and you want to share. And this morning, as in my studies, I was listening to something, and the person said it was they said, what book would you start with? They were question, what if you had to, if I asked the pastor, what book of the Bible should I start a Bible study on? And the pastor said, John. And I'm thinking, is it because John was the disciple that he said, I'm the disciple that Jesus loved? Is the book of love John? You know, I'm thinking, why did they say John? The pastor say John, and I
can tell you why. The most detailed book, even though it's the smallest, he's got a lot of detail in there. And you would think that came from Matthew, right? But there's a lot of detail in John. And not only is there a John, but there's a second John, there's a third John, there's Revelation.
I know, but I just automatically thought,
yeah,
John felt that love. when you know that God loves you, he said, I'm the disciple that Jesus loved over all of them. Everyone, no one else said that. So I want to read John because he has that assurance that God loves me. God loves me. I'm the disciple. I'm the one. He loves me.
And that goes back to the devotion that I wrote this morning about the one who loved more, right? Because the one who was forgiven more loves the debtor more. If I don't have anything to forgive you, like I think we talked about this last week or the week before, where the two debtors, one who owed 50 denarii and the other one who owed 500 denarii, and and the person who they owed the debt to forgave them both. And Jesus said to him in a parable, who do you think loved the man more afterwards? And he said, the one who owed more, the one who he forgave him more. And he said, yeah, exactly. And so when I think about, well, he loved this person more, I'm like, what did he forgive him for? Because we hear all these stories specifically about Mary Magdalene and what she went through and how she gave her life towards the ministry following behind. She could have been changed and kept going in her own direction. But the thing is, when you are changed by your encounter with God, your encounter with Jesus, you are then drawn into that body of Christ, that spirit, as we talked about worshiping in spirit and in truth. When you are worshiping in spirit, just like this woman, you have no choice but to go and spread that gospel, to tell others about the redemption and salvation that has arrived for us. If we are saved, that's fantastic. If we are saved and we help 50 other people to go get saved, then we've accomplished so much more. Because who knows the lives that those 50 are going to change. The beginning half of this whole story is bickering. And he doesn't leave us bickering. I almost call this the thirst trap. Who was more thirsty? The one who asked for water initially or the one who had everlasting water? Like, because they keep going back and forth. You want my water? Do you want mine? Like, where is it? Prove it. And the truth is, what Jesus has to offer us, we're not going to get from a well. We can't dig to the center of the earth and find. We can't do good deeds to earn. We can't. It has to be a gift. It has to be offered. You can't purchase it. And it made me think about how it says that the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Because those that are cast away and judged for their sins by us, not by God, the ones that we judge for what they've done, or those that have judged me for what I've done, we can go there. I don't want to always point the finger. When we come to know God and have a relationship through Christ, we become truly saved. And that ledger that was so far in the red because we have sinned and sinned and sinned, and according to the old law, we would have had to sacrifice so many things just to make it balance it out, because sin demands death. So when Jesus says, I am the last death, there is no more debt after me, because I come to bring you a everlasting water, a everlasting life. He revealed that to her. Not a man. He went back and forth with her. So many times a woman's word, as we discussed, is counted out, especially during this time, especially during biblical times. But Jesus said, I'm going to turn your word into something evangelical. You are going to go spread the gospel. You're going to go take the good news with you. And when people see a change in you, they'll know it's real. They'll know it's genuine. When Paul was originally Saul, hissing and threats and just carrying people off for their slaughter. And he turned his complete world upside down, removed the scales from his eyes, literally. And he became on fire for the Lord, having that encounter with Christ. There was no denying the change. There was no denying in the change in this woman who would go out in the middle of the heat to go pick up some water and instead ran all the way into town to let them know who was there. So my question is to you, now that you know the Lord, who are you telling? Who are you running to go save? She went and told the whole town. Would you just tell people you liked, people that you wanted to see in heaven, but not the other people that you don't like? Let's be real. You calling your enemies and telling them the Messiah's here? She did.
I don't have my enemy's number.
It's not on your recall roster? Like, come on. But that's a legit question.
I was gonna say, you don't know who your enemy is. It might be close.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
The whole town seemed like they were her enemy. And she didn't withhold that news even from them. He saw her in that moment. And last week, we talked about the woman with the issue of blood, and Jesus saw her and called her daughter. And this week, he went to a whole town that was rejected by people that looked like him to tell them that they
I
mattered.
just said that without thinking about the disciples, Judah. 12 disciples, right? So he, a betrayer.
Judah, here's the funny thing. Judah was the one that stopped his brothers from killing Joseph. Jesus came from the line of Judah. So when the other brothers, when the 10 older brothers, because Joseph's little brother wasn't there, but when the 10 older brothers were out there working in the field and they saw Joseph arriving, since we're talking about Joseph's well, right? Jacob and Joseph's well, they said, you know what? Let us throw him in this cistern, in this well. Let us throw him in this well and kill him. And that initially they said, let us kill him and throw him in there and tell dad, some animals just kind of ripped him apart. And Judah said, no, let's just put him down here and sell him off to this caravan of people. And so I love that thousands of years later, we have the line of Judah coming back to Joseph's land, to save the descendants, to save the Samaritans, right there at the well. And he did it through the woman at the well. Please don't ever tell yourself you're not worth it, that nobody will ever stop for you, that nobody will ever have the patience to argue with you, to tell you the truth. Because sometimes you need to be argued with. She's a woman of valor, not because of who she was before, but because of the transformation she allowed to have within herself and let for others to occur. And as we went through Proverbs 31 and we talked about, oh, she's this, she's that, she makes clothes in the middle of the night and gets no sleep, and she's making good decisions and all this, right? Proverbs 31, the woman that we aspire to be. Well, guess what? This woman was personally sought by Jesus. in the midst of her pain. And you're no different. And thank God for that.
Yeah.